So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Sonic, so let's start the series. She was referred to as the Orange Flash, but this had nothing to do with the flying thunder god and more to do with her exceptional speed, which any true shinobi would admire, indeed, covet. When she was on duty, the only thing enemy shinobi ever saw of her was an orange blur as it sped past them at speeds they couldn't possibly match. Her trademarks were tinted goggles, bright red hair the color of fresh blood, and a bright orange scarf around her face. The shinobi frequently argued whether she even bothered with the chakra control technique most used to run on water, or if she was just so fast that it didn't matter. She was famous for literally running over obstacles placed in her path, skating at high speeds over ice, and running over water like it was smooth ground. The Orange Flash reportedly had a summons contract that allowed her to reverse summon herself to whatever clan she was allied with and summon herself back just outside the delivery point. No one had been able to catch her, a fact she took pride in. Of course, there had been a few occasions when entire shinobi teams of elite jounin were hired to stop her from making a delivery. She was either freelance or missing mean because no community could yet claim to have her as a messenger. She shopped outside the hidden villages the most of the time so that no one could tell who she belonged to. Therefore, the fact that the Orange Flash was a neglected Jinchuriki who was only getting the barest minimum of training, and the dregs at that, would likely shock a good number of people. A girl who used a small amount of chakra to change the color of her hair and covered her face because she had two very noticeable whisker marks that were hard to cover up with makeup because they frequently disappeared at the speed she was traveling, found that wearing a scarf made things easier and prevented dust from getting in her nose. She was named Uzumaki Naruto. Since she was unable to use Sonic or Sonix as she had originally intended, she decided to use Nozomi Kamikaze. She was once compared to the insane love child of Sonic the Hedgehog and his two-tailed kitten partner Miles Prowler, whom everyone dubbed Tails, by her mentors and actual teachers. Shadow taught her ninjutsu and infiltration. Rouge the Bat taught her the little things that all kunoichi should know before they went into battle and the things that made life easier. Amy taught her how to fight with weapons and how to create her own small subspace to hide them in. Sonic taught her how to run and break the sound barrier. Tails taught her how to think and put things together on the fly, like makeshift weapons. Among other things, Knuckles taught her taijutsu and chakra sensing, and Shadow taught her how to think and makeshift weapons. If she failed a third time, she wouldn't even bother going to get her chakra sealed because they were greater teachers than Konoha could provide. Since she had never been a genin of the village in the first place, they were legally unable to report her missing, thus she was going to work full-time as a messenger. However, she would charge more for Konoha to have their messages delivered expressly if they attempted to drag her back. She claimed that her only dream was to run the world and see everything, and that having a small friendship with a small number of people was barely worth being loyal to a village that had never shown her any. Her final opportunity to become a shinobi was the genin exam today. If everything went as it had the year before, she would be fortunate to receive a headband, let alone advance to the secondary exam. Naruto patiently endured the tests, but once again, that jerk Mizuki handed her the incorrect one. She knew it would be useless to confront him about it because the creep had already used genjutsu on her test the last time. This implied that her taijutsu exams and weaponry would need to be up to par. Her opponent in the taijutsu battle gave her all the information she needed to know that she would not pass this test. She had never liked being Naruto Uzumaki, potential genin of the leaf, all that much either, and her true family had always said that the leaf held her back, even if they were animals who spoke like her and walked upright. People who were too dim-witted to see that the container wasn't what she was holding back, and who subtly made fun of her for it. She was going to her fallback option, her home in Iron Country, which was renowned for being neutral and where samurai ruled instead of shinobi, so to hell with Konoha if she failed this exam. And they were serious about maintaining their impartiality. Naruto had been making payments on that house for the past 2 years, and she was able to do so because of the expedited delivery service she offered. She was well liked by Iwa, AIM, Kumo, and the majority of the smaller villages. She even had a room set aside for messenger birds. If a shinobi village wanted to recruit her, they would send a quick bird, and she would rush to the office of whoever led the village. She primarily ran for AIM, Iwa, and the newly formed Odo. The only reason she bothered with Odo or the strange boss was because she wanted the references, but to be honest, Odogakure really frightened her. There, she at least made some friends, including the ill Kimimaro, Kabuto, and Karen. Someone as direct as Karen, cunning as Kabuto, or as terrifying as an enraged Kimimaro would disturb most people. After they verified that Nozomi was an Uzumaki like her, Karen fell in love with her right away. Kabuto performed the blood test primarily to make the girls laugh. Despite his tendency to be suspicious and his ability to get into almost any situation, Kabuto had come to genuinely like Nozomi, because she was always able to lift his spirits. Kabuto could tell she genuinely cared about them and wasn't expecting anything in return, whether it was something as simple as his favorite flower or a book she thought he might enjoy. Ironically, this was able to win him over from his boss, Orochimaru, to her. She simply felt he was a cool older brother and didn't find him scary. Additionally, Kimimaro won his favor by being polite and smuggling him food. Naruto concealed a sigh. She didn't even bother with the genjutsu part because she was never good at them in the first place and already found it difficult to break the items, so she just put up a strong performance and hoped for the best. She knew she wouldn't receive a good score against a jounin opponent. And the last nail in the coffin was ninjutsu, the one skill she should have possessed. Even though Irika was Kami's favorite chunin, she refused to give her a passing grade even though she got 2 of the 3 standard clone jutsu accurate. Kami detested the standard clone jutsu. At the end of the day, Naruto realized that she might as well leave Konoha and not bother to look back because she would never make genin anymore unless there were extremely compelling reasons. You can only imagine how confused she was when the jerk known as Mizuki-sensei suggested a genin exam that was extra and off the books. As though, had it truly existed, she would have discovered it much sooner, particularly after learning the target's identity. Did Mizuki intend to use the unfortunate girl as a pawn? All of a sudden, Orochimaru placed an urgent order for the Orange Flash Express, paying 2 million ryu to deliver a fairly large and significant item. She received $1 million for accepting the job due of the risks, as well as insurance money, so even if she never received the item, she was still compensated for her time and travel expenses, and she would receive another $1 million if the item was delivered successfully. The Forbidden Scroll definitely filled the criteria. Naruto decided that this was the ideal time to bid Konoha farewell as Naruto Uzumaki, as she made her way home and got ready. It took an hour to devise a practical plan with plenty of flexibility, but she knew Irika, and it was likely that he would catch her before Mizuki could find her. She would need to make sure he was stopped long enough for Mizuki to steal the scroll, and have enough time to either reach Nozomi or be caught with it. In any case, Naruto's chances of becoming a Konoha genin would be drastically reduced. She would need to have Tails be her body double, as was the case on the rare occasions she had to leave for a few days due to an urgent birth. He continued to read Fox with his chakra, but Rouge claims that Naruto had also. Even if he was caught, the fact that Tails was registered as a summon gave the shinobi some tolerance. Tails agreed to pretend to be Naruto for a moment while she took her place as Nozomi. Before a cunning thought came to her, Naruto broke inside the office and made sure to disable the Hokage without killing him. That was a surefire way to be permanently barred from the village. The blackmail material was well worth the few extra seconds it required, and if she did it correctly, she could perhaps accuse her client of taking the Sandame's pornography collection. Because it contained a collection of extremely rare and nearly suicidal photocopies of the most powerful, and hottest, kunoichi in various states of undress and with multiple partners, of both genders in compromising positions, his first edition, personally signed, Super Platinum collection of Ika Ika Paradise was rumored to be worth 3 mid-S rank missions for a single copy. The Sandame possessed the entire collection, and he consistently received the first copy of the incredibly rare set. At the very least, Orochimaru might sell them and profit quickly, or she could exchange them for Kakuzu, who could then use them to blackmail the Hokage for the return of his priceless porn collection. The miser would undoubtedly adore her for this. After arriving at the rendezvous, Naruto called forth Tails. It should be mentioned that Naruto got along best with Tails, even though she shared the most with Sonic, the strongest summoner of Dream Island. The speed demon of the highest order, Sonic was a blue hedgehog with green eyes, a strange choice of shoes, which she eventually had to imitate because all the other shoes she owned couldn't keep up with the speed she ran at, a high affinity for wind, and a knack for earth. He also loved chili dogs just as much as she did ramen and miso. Their battles over superiority were legendary, and they once devastated Eggman's base. He was a shinobi who had become trapped in the summoning realm for reasons she never found out, after playing a practical joke on him by ruining their enormous lunch. Needless to say, even though he had an odd affection for the feisty girl because she seemed to remind him of his granddaughter, the grouchy and crazy egg-headed guy never ventured to ruin their meals again. Eggman claims that he terrorized Dream Island primarily out of boredom, because he was unable to find a means to return home. Naruto felt that he wasn't making a concerted effort to return home because he wasn't dealing with the Summoning Realm's wars or anything else. Naruto opened the scroll while she waited, and she was drooling over the first jutsu alone. Shadow clones seemed to be the answer to her clone jutsu dilemma. Cameras, particularly those that were adjusted for night vision and 2D photography, were really helpful, so she had Tails copy everything on the scroll in 30 minutes. She wanted to make sure she had every picture on the scroll so she could choose whatever jutsu to learn, even though it would have taken 10. She was still completely bored 30 minutes later. Luckily, Mizuki arrived 10 minutes after she reached the point of extreme boredom. Regretfully, this gave Naruto ample time to create an almost flawless duplicate of the Forbidden Scroll to present to the traitor. Mizuki gave Tails an excessively forceful blow, which caused Naruto to change her retaliation. Before delivering the second false scroll she made to Orochimaru, she would give him a 5-minute head start, which would be more than enough time to notify the ANBU where to look for the fool. 30 minutes would also be more than enough time for her to replicate the majority of the contents without making it clear that it was a fake. Nozomi watched her watch impatiently, and when the Konoha ANBU arrived an hour later, she was not at all startled. Rooster demanded, "What is your business so close to Konoha?" Speaking in a professional tone, Nozomi said, "Special courier kamikaze, out of iron. I was hired to make a delivery to Rice Country from Konoha. They told me to wait here for a chunin carrying a bulky item from the village," making sure to display her credentials. Their job was to deliver items, scrolls, or messages, nothing more and nothing less. Special couriers out of iron were notorious for not giving a damn about shinobi or their affairs. They also enforced their own neutrality, which meant that during times of war, they could enter any village with less trouble than, say, a shinobi carrying the same message. "What's the name of the chunin which is supposed to bring the item?" the ANBU asked, tensing up. "Mizuki," Nozomi said. The Orange Flash was well known for refusing bribes and consistently delivering, so the ANBU knew better than to attempt to buy her not to accept the delivery. Therefore, their only choice was to stop Mizuki before he gave it to him. She would remain where she was because it would be more troublesome to leave the village if she did so. If the item or message was crucial, she would be held until she gave it over, which would require her to break out. After 15 minutes, the ANBU made sure to show Nozomi Mizuki's severely battered body as evidence that he had been caught and had failed to make the delivery. She nodded and walked away, saying that it wasn't her concern if the shinobi caught the delivery boy before he could get to the courier. She made sure to inform the client of this and went home. Naruto smiled, recalling how she had been yelled at for 5 hours in a row the previous evening and how the Hokage's advisors had made the elderly man sign a document declaring that she would never be assigned to a traditional genin squad. This meant that if they wanted to keep their weapon, they would need to get a personal jounin. It was painful to have her chakra forcibly sealed, but Tails was able to break that in an hour and put a fake on top of the seals. She had a copy of the documents proving that she had been barred from the shinobi courts, and the majority of her belongings were already sealed and ready to go. While enjoying a final supper with Irika, she determined that this was the ideal moment to find Kabuto so that he would be present when her farewell surprise was set off. She had promised him that he would get a front-row seat to Danzu getting the ass-kicking he so richly deserved after breaking into Root and booby-trapping the hell out of the place so that, wherever it blew up, Danzu's secret army would be blown wide open for the entire village to see. He had been out for Danzu for years, and with good reason. It took some effort, but it made her life easier to pass Kabuto and deliver the message the same way Orochimaru usually did. A few hours later, Kabuto met her, and was shocked to discover that his little sister, Nozomi, was the Kyubi Jinchuriki, gave her enough medical supplies, and agreed to meet for tea later. He then took his place while Naruto set off her retaliation for all the nonsense Danzu had caused them both for years. Because the concealed Root army was unaware of the abrupt incident, they were unable to escape being spotted by the actual ANBU. The explosion was loud, large, and eye-catching. An unexpected invasion force hidden beneath Konoha caused such a huge commotion that nobody realized until a few weeks later that certain well-known prepubescent children were missing until after the event. Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, and Hinata Hyuga. Jiraiya discovered the first a few weeks later, but the Hyuga patriarch refused to take her back in spite of his threats. The main reason is because Tsunade terrified the living daylights out of him, and rightfully so, but the Hyuga were only somewhat frightening. The shy heiress had been taken as an apprentice by Tsunade, who was not returning her. In exchange for taking on another apprentice, she apparently struck a deal with a well-known courier from Iron that would prevent her from receiving immediate requests for money, at least not from the Orange Flash. Furthermore, Tsunade would not have given Hinata away after witnessing her skill at Iriijitsu. She was unquestionably worth training. However, Sasuke and Naruto were in the wind. Ironically, Sasuke adopted Sonic's antagonist Shadow, while Nozomi almost exactly mirrored Sonic, even to sharing a strong elemental affinity for wind, despite her minor being water rather than earth. Additionally, they have similar elemental affinities. Shortly after discovering how to reverse summon herself, Naruto had once unintentionally abducted Sasuke for 5 hours. After recovering from his astonishment, and attempting to maul the kunoichi due to a miscommunication about what had transpired, he encountered Shadow. The two clicked right away, to the extent that Sasuke referred to him as Shadow Nii, just as Nozomi referred to Sonic as her brother and summoned him personally alongside Tails. Therefore, Nozomi would take him to Dream Island to train under Shadow and Knuckles full-time in exchange for taking the entire Uchiha library and everything valuable from the estate. At least until he reached a point where he gained more from reading the library he had brought with him, and he left with Shadow, as it appears he read almost every book on the island. So that he could learn how to be a shinobi without having to deal with those annoying hidden villages telling him what to do and filling out all that paperwork, he would join her as a special courier. Alright, so perhaps he still needed to submit an activity report for insurance purposes, but it wasn't nearly as much as a genin would have to do. As Nozomi raced through the downpour, the shinobi in the village were alerted. Luckily, they already recognized her and wouldn't interfere with her delivery. She had 2 deliveries to make, one to Itachi, who had undoubtedly heard that his brother was missing, and the other to Kakuzu, with whom she intended to swap the Hokage's priceless porn collection. Despite popular belief, Itachi had tormented his brother out of love because he knew that if he didn't, Sasuke might follow. Itachi's devotion to his younger brother was so intense that it almost drove him insane, and the extent to which he would go in order to keep Sasuke safe was as appalling. For this reason, Nozomi instructed Sasuke, who was only 7 years old at the time, to compose a letter to his brother explaining his feelings over Itachi's departure and how much he wanted to punch him for the mess he left behind. Nozomi thought that a letter exchange could help heal the wounds caused by the massacre that Itachi had to endure. Special Courier, I've got a couple of deliveries for the Red Dawn for 2 members. ID and chakra check. They allowed Nozomi to enter once she flashed her chakra on the paper and it matched. In order to allow Itachi time to read the letters while she attempted to trade the porn for money or favors, she located him first and delivered them. Kakuzu gave the red-haired child a glance that was respectful but not malicious. How the hell did you get the Hokage's complete collection of the super rare, almost impossible to get, Ika? You hear about the attempted theft of the Forbidden Scroll a few weeks back. Of course, he responded, feeling almost offended that he would be exposed. The one who laid the Hokage flat on his ass with a perverted henge took the time to rob him of his special collection and delivered it on a courier run along with the timid form of the Hyuga heiress. I delivered her to the Slug Princess and kept the porn, since I knew you'd definitely pay for it and be discreet about the purchase. Kakuzu's grin broke through his disguise. He liked this youngster for a reason. What's your price for the collection? Nozomi grinned. 2 favors for each book and no less than 1 billion for the whole set, complete with photos. 1 billion was inexpensive for the entire set, and since she was so frugal with them, favors were even less expensive. However, if he didn't barter, he wouldn't be the largest miser in the Akatsuki, and hence in command of the budget. 753 favors. 703 favors, plus 3 rare kenjutsu and a summon scroll. 725, 3 favors, 2 rare kenjutsu and an automatic pass through the guards. Make that a pass for me and my soon-to-be new partner and you have a deal. Oh, and I get to make one of the newer members of the group my bitch for a year, replied Nozomi. Kakuzu responded, agreed, and they used blood and chakra to sign the agreement. Nozomi held off on giving the porn and the photos until Kakuzu gave her the passes, the rare kenjutsu, one for herself and one for Sasuke, and the agreed-upon sum. Kakuzu grinned and said, "It's a pleasure doing business with you." "Same, I'll see if any of your comrade have a delivery for me," have fun discreetly blackmailing the Hokage for his porn collection back, though if I were you I'd use some of it to barter for the head of Shimura Danzu. If I remember right he did something to piss off Pain and Conan a while back. You could use him as a way to get the boss to get off your ass or get a better mission. Kakuzu remarked, thanks for the reminder, feeling much happier. He could use a few books to cover the cost of his first paid vacation since being hired. Itachi discovered Nozomi 5 minutes after she had left the negotiations. You know where my brother is. He's agreed to be my courier partner, in exchange for free passage out of the village. It's not the Konoha you remember, Itachi, and in the event they don't bother to clean house after the mess Uzumaki left by revealing Root in all its glory, it's better he were out of the village in Danzu's hands. Before he removed the letters from his pocket, Itachi pulled a face. Is it would you be willing to deliver these to him? He deserves to know the truth if he's going to abandon his village. Itachi nodded appreciatively as Nozomi replied, free of charge. Incidentally, he did rob the place before he left, and stole almost all of the Uchiha family funds, Itachi remarked. Itachi gulped before letting out a low laugh, which would undoubtedly make the council furious when they learned. Before giving the letter to Sasuke, Nozomi waited for Shadow to finish for the day. Once he signed it, she gave it to him. Nozomi sighed as Sasuke sat down, and halfway through, his eyes widened in complete disbelief, which was soon followed by rage. She went to find Knuckles and informed him that, unless they trained him until he fell, whatever Itachi had written in that letter would likely impair Sasuke's judgment for a while. She also said that it was better to let him vent his pain and anger in a way that would make him stronger than to let him leave the island, and that, in addition, Knuckles enjoyed having a reason to beat people to the ground. Sasuke gave her a fierce look, but that was the most energy he had left after Knuckles mercilessly exploited his distraction. Then Nozomi stated the one thing that made all she had just done to him worthwhile. Ji-san knows the high-end explosive seals, as in the kind the demolition teams in Konoha have to get special clearance to use. They were still dealing with the fallout from her exposing Danzu's small army when she used the medium-level ones on the root base. Kabuto is extremely happy about the scenario, especially after learning that the man had gone missing in secret and that his head had been returned, along with the rest of his body parts, mangled and obviously urinated on, not by Nozomi, but by another, much older, messenger. They continued to attempt to reintegrate Danzu's forces with the rest of Konoha proper, although their efforts were only partially successful thus far. As far as they knew, Kabuto remained their commanding officer until a replacement could be found, and he made sure to give them a password that no one in Konoha would use, let alone Root, especially since he had been surreptitiously integrating the ones remaining on missions using his knowledge of Root against them. In a short time, anyone attempting to regain them would die. Her private nickname for Eggman was Ji-san. The irony is that, given her red hair and disposition, Nozomi might have easily passed for Eggman's daughter or something. No one was certain of the man's age, they only knew that he was an annoyance. Although he still launched his robots on a rampage and other such activities, Nozomi's presence did, to her credit, make his normal attempts to spice things up pretty mild. Now that he had a fiery granddaughter to treat and teach, he wasn't quite as bored, even though he did know more about seals than anybody she had ever heard of. It seems that the most of his irritating attacks were really the result of boredom. Learning seals was a pain in the ass, but usually speaking, learning under the Eggman meant getting to blow stuff up, so Sasuke woke up. He also enjoyed blowing stuff up because he was a Uchiha. Sasuke went to the insane seal master to get some explosive notes to play with after he finished eating. "I hate you so much." Nozomi responded, "I love you too, Baka, protruding her tongue at Sasuke. As the unofficial mediator between the Uchiha brothers, she had so far persuaded Pain to grant her a one-year loan of Itachi, completing the deal she had struck with Kakazu. Itachi was supposed to be her bitch till the end of the year, but in reality, he would be training her and Sasuke for a year when his brother woke up his Sharingan and doing errands for them throughout Iron Country. Even after Kakazu carefully captured the exchange of items, money, and the soon-to-be-dead Danzu's expression when he realized what had actually happened to his porn hoard, she continued to giggle. She laughed when she heard some of the things the Hokage said when he discovered that Naruto had taken his porn and traded it for an S-rank missing meme from Waterfall, but not quite as much as Itachi did when he learned of it. Whenever he was reminded of it, usually when a new Ika appeared, he would occasionally chuckle for 5 minutes. This served the old geezer well for asking him to kill his entire tribe. Itachi was rewarded with a message full of foul language after making sure to include references to the incident in his reports to the Hokage via Jiraiya. Nozomi occasionally questioned if it would be worthwhile to sneak back into Konoha, steal the collection twice, and sell it to the Tsuchikage on the condition that he ensure the Hokage was aware of the whereabouts of his missing porn. There was no need to be exposed as Naruto for a few books and explicit photos, so she put that prank on hold. Regardless of how amusing the elderly monkey was upon discovering that his pornography had been stolen, oddly, Eggman referred to her as a natural Uzumaki after hearing what she did. You can only imagine how shocked he was to learn that she was actually an Uzumaki, but she went by a different name because no one knew that the Orange Flash was the ill-trained Jinchuriki girl, and she wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. Before it was destroyed, Eggman was a retired elder from Yuzushiogakure and an Uzumaki. At least now she understood why he had never returned home. Additionally, Kabuto had a very strange expression on his face due to another blood test that confirmed he was an Uzumaki, and therefore genuinely family. How in the name of the six-path sage did you find your own grandfather? In reality, Nozomi's maternal grandfather was Eggman, whose real name was Ichiro Uzumaki. Uzumaki were naturally long-lived, and whatever these Chaos Emeralds were, they appeared to slow down the aging process even more than usual in both humans and animals. In fact, a man approaching 60 years old still looked like he was in his prime. Since just one of the emeralds was truly green, he could not really care less about them, but it did get the summons in the mood for a battle, something he did care about. At least there was some truth to the moniker she gave Eggman. Look at the bright side, Nozomi replied with a smile. What bright side? You're almost at the point you get those fancy eyes and get one free hit on your brother for the crap he put you through. The reminder made Sasuke smile. Multiple hunter nin were chasing him to bring him back since the morons from Konoha were still convinced that he and Naruto had run off together, in some cheesy parody of a romance novel. Although he passed the Genin exam, he was not legally a Konoha ninja because he never took the secondary one or possessed his ninja ID with his picture and chakra signature. Up until his ninja ID was created, he was legally still a civilian. This meant that, technically speaking, they couldn't drag him back unless one of their hunters, Anbu, could stealthily get him. This explains why he was essentially living on Dream Island full-time, without any fangirls, and training nearly non-stop, leaving him a contented and moaning mess on the pallet that Cream, the island's only medic, uses for her patients. One of the few residents of the island with whom Nozomi had never had regular lessons was Cream, primarily because she was not very good at using medical jutsu and usually recovered with a little rest. The most she had ever done with Cream was memorize all the medicinal plants that were common throughout the elemental countries, along with basic battlefield medicine that any civilian could perform. Nozomi always kept a full battle med kit in her storage area where she kept her weapons, complete with a full set of antidotes, antivenom, and antitoxins. Even if the rarer ones would have to be bartered for as payment for her courier service. So where are you planning to hit your brother? Who said anything about hitting him? After the shit he pulled with that stupid Tsukiyomi thing, I fully intend to give him a quick and painful shot between the legs. Nozomi grinned more broadly. So that's why you've had Knuckles focus on leg strength the past couple of weeks. For some strange reason, Sasuke approached Knuckles as soon as he heard that he was entitled to one free hit for the trauma his brother had caused him. He politely asked for advice on how to make his legs strong enough to smash boulders, and Knuckles, who was always willing to train some poor bastard into the ground, complied. Nozomi intended to use her camera for the touching moment, but Itachi was in for an unpleasant shock when Sasuke saw him again. The duration since their escape from Konoha was 3 months. Hinata was doing well, better than well, in fact, and had at last found her own identity without worrying about attempting to win her father over. To Nozomi's amusement, Hinata's personality seemed to change drastically. She had gone from being a shy, nearly terrified Shadow Academy student to a blazing powerhouse who was more likely to slam you into a wall with her fist than to employ her clan's tippy-tap technique. After having to question Tsunade about how she managed to pull it off, Nozomi immediately burst out laughing. After getting Hinata intoxicated enough to lose her inhibitions, she pushed all the buttons until the girl eventually lost it and attempted to choke Tsunade with her hands. Once Tsunade knew what to press, it was all over. After 2 months, Hinata's patience, which was like that of a saint, broke like a frail twig. Yes, she still had the same soft and loving nature as before, but she now had the inner strength to stand up for herself. As it happened, Tsunade discovered that Hinata was exceptionally skilled at removing her debts. She would charge more to have the Hyuga heiress heal anyone from powerful clans, and every penny went directly toward Tsunade's debt repayment. Tsunade taught Hinata the fine technique of the ninja's game right away after witnessing the kind, naive, and gentle Hinata-chan steal hard currency from their frugal and wealthy owners. Poker. She was then thrown to Nozomi by Shizune, who was far more skilled than Tsunade at it. In fact, the darker-haired woman frequently paid Nozomi to play against individuals who were pursuing her instructor for substantial sums of money, leaving those poor saps to curse the name Orange Flash. It just so happened that they still hired her as a messenger. Hina-chan. Nozomi-chan. When she saw Tsunade with a monster hangover and 2 extremely callous apprentices, Shizune told her to stop making girlish squeals because she knew Nozomi was doing it on purpose. However, she had to admit that it was fortunate that Hinata and Naruto became friends right away because the girl needed someone her own age to connect with rather than a group of animals. She had to admit that she adored Knuckles and Cream, the bunny medic. Cream was simply too cute. So, how is Sasuke-san doing? Nozomi smiled malevolently. He's preparing for when his brother will have to be our personal bitch for a year. Itachi has agreed to give him 1 free shot, and Sasuke's planning a big one right between the legs. So far he's been able to crush small boulders. Coincidentally, how much would it take for you to come visit the island long enough to heal Itachi? Is this Itachi, as in Uchiha Itachi, the Kinslayer? Apparently it was a setup by the Evil Three and the Hokage, but only after Danzo pushed the Uchiha into a corner first. Itachi only agreed to do it because he wanted to keep his brother safe from Danzo. Speaking of Danzo, what exactly happened to him? The full story or the short one? Short. He brought Root back, pissed off the wrong people, and when I stole the Hokage's porn collection, K-Evil snickering from the other girls, I used it to help an S-rank nin bribe the Hokage into dropping the barrier for a few hours while they kidnapped him. A week later they sent him back piece by bloodied piece with a clearly desecrated corpse. Thought I have it on good authority the bastard had at least 13 Sharingan implanted, and had your grandfather's face growing out of the same arm. Tsunade went pale. So basically a case of him pissing off the wrong person and them having the right material to make the Hokage look the other way, replied Hinata. Exactly, should have heard the language the old man used when he found out I was the one who stole it, laughed Nozomi. Tsunade snorted. I know that face, what sort of prank are you planning, replied Hinata. Nothing much, just that the next time I have to do an overnight courier run to Konoha, that maybe I might swing by the Hokage's office and steal the porn again, only this time I'll sell it to the Tsuchikage instead of the oldest miser in the elemental nations, innocently replied Nozomi. Shizune and Tsunade choked. The Tsuchikage, really? Hinata asked, her eyes glimmering with laughter. Can you think of anything that would get him on my side faster than having the world's greatest blackmail material on the Hokage? Nozomi asked with bright eyes. Tsunade stated, he might very well kill you if he found out. According to my maternal grandfather, I'd be doing my Uzumaki heritage proud, Nozomi replied. Your grandfather? Apparently Ichiro Uzumaki used a seal diagram wrong, landed in the summons realm and got stuck. Either the seal was destroyed with Yuzu, or something's keeping him in the summons realm. Either way he's been bored out of his skull long enough to become a public menace to the island. The sad thing is that I actually believe you, and I'm half Uzumaki myself. Let it never be said our clan is boring, Tsunade replied. So will you heal Itachi? From what I heard he has some sort of issue with his lungs, and he's too cheap or too cool to get it checked by a proper medic nin. In addition, Sasuke would get a kick out of watching his older brother get scolded by a woman who is old enough to be their grandma. When exactly do you want to schedule this appointment? As soon as Duck but finally wakes up his stupid Dujitsu. Until he does that there's no good reason to bring Itachi in for a bit, though I might drag his partner along too for a quick laugh and give both of them an overdue vacation. Even though the Akatsuki were chasing the tailed creatures, they would never dare hurt Nozomi because, among other things, she was essentially their favorite gaki and little sister. She was treated like a little sister by Pain, Konan, Itachi, and Deidara, who were constantly willing to learn new things. They liked her because she obviously had the largest collection of balls in the elemental countries and she wasn't scared to bullshit her way out of trouble. Kisame, Sasori, Kakuzu, and Zetsu treated her like their favorite obnoxious little child, mainly because they were the ones she had the most blackmail on. There was one other member, but Toby was so annoying that the majority of the other members made a special effort to prevent him from seeing Nozomi. It was unclear, though, whether this was because they didn't want him to contaminate her with his utterly ridiculous and obnoxious habits or for some other reason. Then Tsunade recalled a crucial detail. Before I forget, Jiraiya's in town. Nozomi pulled up her scarf to cover her whisker scars and murmured, crap. I'll see you guys later. She made sure to check the courier's outpost for work and found a brief job that would get her far, far away from town before the Toad Sage recognized her, but it would take no more than an hour. Nozomi wasn't scared of the man, on the contrary, she was certain that he was Konoha's second best spy master, now first since Danzo was dead, and that he was likely searching for the runaway lovers, Naruto and Sasuke. If he saw her dressed as the Orange Flash, he might make assumptions that could result in Konoha's hunter nin catching her in the act, and she had put too much effort into opening her shop. As it was, if she was lucky enough to have a vacation day each month, she usually had to give notice. Nozomi returned to her home on Dream Island just in time to hear Sasuke's weary cheer. She saw a now familiar pair of crimson eyes as she approached her brother in everything but blood, but there was only one tomo on each eye rather than the customary three. This was probably for taijutsu, given that he had been practicing with knuckles. And to think, if we had stayed in Konoha it would have taken even longer to get them and we would have had to chase that damn cat called Tora and call it a mission, replied Nozomi. That cat was nasty, Sasuke thought with a shudder. On the plus side, this means we now have a legitimate reason to drag Itachi here, and once you incapacitate his sorry ass Tsunade can see what's up with his lungs, laughed Nozomi. It was more than enough time for Tsunade to give Itachi a thorough diagnostic because Itachi detested hospitals and shunned medic nin like the plague. Sasuke's smile was evil because, shinobi or not, no man liked taking a hard kick to the balls. It was also one of the dirtiest, and simplest, ways to render some poor bastard incapacitated for at least a full minute. It was likely that his blue-skinned companion would find the whole affair amusing and assist Nozomi in photographing Itachi's face. Itachi glanced at the hawk, which was bred for speed and sported the classic Uzumaki swirl on a brilliant orange vest that was visible to any fool, even in the rain. Previously known as the jovial Naruto, although he now added the adjective, insane, just like her mother, to the happy description, Nozomi used this method to communicate with people without physically being there. Itachi was certain that Naruto worked 6 days a week, with the last day not being for relaxation, unless she clearly posted that she was on vacation, which she took once a month for 3 full days, but rather so that she could continue training to become a shinobi. Although she was careful to stay away from Konoha until the disaster she left behind was either cleared up or forgotten, she actually benefited more from her training than most genin because she was always wandering around in the elemental countries. The Hokage would have been fortunate to have a free day in time for the Chunin exams because of Danzu's death and the subsequent revelation of his secret army, as well as the numerous covert operations that would have severely damaged Konoha's reputation if even 25% of them had leaked to the other hidden villages. In addition, he had to buy back his porn collection from the avaricious miser known as Kakuzu and covertly let Danzu die in excruciating pain. Therefore, it was probably best for her to stay away from Konoha for the time being, as well as her perverted godfather, who was looking everywhere for her and her boyfriend. Positively, if Konoha wanted to start a conversation, Pain was in a far more reasonable attitude. He would have immediately slain every Konoha nin, except for Itachi, but now he would at least question them before killing them. Nozomi had mentioned that they would be staying on a literal island paradise, but that hunting the land-bound natives was frowned upon, so any red meat like beef or lamb would have to be imported. Itachi reached for his personal scroll, which he carried with him because it contained all the supplies he would need to live outdoors for a while. Since she had not yet discovered a location in the elemental nations that offered the sausage-like meat, she was still baffled as to where Sonic continued to acquire his hot dogs. In addition, she wasn't totally certain where they got their meat from, because Eggman wasn't a vegetarian, and she was positive that hunting was not prohibited on the island but was so strongly discouraged that it might as well be. Itachi discovered Kisame and Deidara bickering over what to watch while seated in front of the television. Kisame, remember that vacation we were going to get once Nozomi claimed that favor from Kakuzu? Kisame perked up and asked, the one where you're her errand boy for a year? He was primarily going because it meant a free paid vacation, which was extremely uncommon given how frugal Kakuzu was with the money and how difficult it was to persuade Pain to stop whining over losing 2 of his minions. Since the rooms were free and the weather was reportedly tropical virtually year-round, they primarily had to pay for food in this instance. In addition, it was the joyfully malevolent Nozomi, a girl who had a respectable enough affinity for water to be able to do some harm with some of the jutsu he knew. In addition to the fact that Nozomi had alluded to Sasuke's plans for his single free shot, he was not going to overlook that. "Where are you two idiots heading, Nozomi's claimed her Akatsuki errand boy for a year, and she chose Itachi. Deidara became alert. "Room for one more, No way in hell am I going to stick around to deal with Toby." There were never more than 10 Akatsuki at any given time, and Kakuzu had made it plain that he would murder Toby if they dared to pair the idiot with him. Toby was currently in the probationary portion of the Akatsuki training, shadowing Zetsu, their chief spy, until a space opened. The last 4 partners Pain had given him had already been dead. Toby would have to team up with whoever was available or the least experienced, which in this case was Deidara, since Zetsu was now working as a spy on Konoha to watch how they handled the crisis they were in. Itachi snorted. "No blowing everything up actually, I take that back, no blowing up anything living. From what I heard one of the inhabitants has a thing for metal automatons like Sasori's puppets, but no chakra strings, they get blown up regularly and even fight back," Itachi remarked. Because Toby was bothersome, he could relate to Deidara. Deidara became alert before approaching Pain to inquire, "You sure you want to bring him along?" Nozomi said Sasuke had been experimenting with explosives, and he could use a break. Besides, I overheard Sasori bitching about him accidentally blowing up half his collection or selling it to some fangirls he found from Suna. Kisame laughed. "Speaking of fangirls," Itachi snorted. Apparently half the reason he's still training on the island is because he's not so eager to discredit the rumor that he and Naruto were dating, he's using her as fangirl repellent. Kisame burst out laughing just as Deidara came back. He said, "He gave me 6 months, with satisfaction. 6 months for Sasori to relax and not feel the need to murder his partner, 6 months free from the excessive paperwork Deidara may create. The fact that he could catch his own, hello vacation, and that he simply had to pay for food meant that it was more than he had planned to receive anyhow." After stocking the refrigerator in the house they would be staying at, which had hammocks instead of actual futons, Nozomi summoned the 3 in reverse. Deidara wasn't what she had anticipated, but at least she had someone with whom to discuss explosive seals. The home she had given him was distinct. She then handed a standard camera and a video camera to Deidara and Kisame. Since Eggman's fortress had several cameras and Sasuke seemed to share Nozomi's fondness for explosions, the Uchiha brothers' reunion took place there. However, the Uchiha were always a group of pyromaniacs. Deidara laughed so hard he had hiccups when Sasuke retaliated for the trauma caused by Tsukiyomi and made him the exclusive target of the fucking Uchiha fangirls, even for the deceased Uchiha. Even Kisame was laughing evilly when he learned that Nozomi had made sure he wouldn't be moving while the woman gave him a long overdue physical since Itachi was in excruciating pain, and it only got worse when Tsunade arrived soon after. The Akatsuki were known for their distaste for medics. The best part is that they may make some money by selling the footage to Kakuzu. As soon as Tsunade reached Itachi's chest, she scowled. "And when, exactly, were you planning to have your lungs checked, young man?" she said. Itachi grimaced. Sasuke asked, "Wait, what about his lungs?" "Good kick, Gaki, a bit rough, but you have some potential. Your idiot brother here has a lung condition, a bad one, and if left untreated it will kill him before he turns 25, Tsunade bluntly stated. Sasuke's scowl intensified. "Just because you took out mom doesn't mean you should be so lax about your own health, Baka," replied Sasuke. Although Sasuke had always been close to Itachi, it was still rather humorous to see that he had a mother hen side, so Nozomi fought back a giggle. Nozomi had a sinister notion. Since you're here, Granny, how about training Sasuke in the basics of Iriijitsu? Make it so Itachi won't be able to escape the medic Nins, ever. An Uchiha medic, now that has some potential. That Hyuga girl you dropped with me has some of the best instincts I've seen in a long time, and even better control. I wonder how well a Uchiha could do. Deidara and Kisame laughed more when they saw Itachi's mildly appalled expression. After Deidara recovered from his giggles, he stated, "You are an evil, twisted bitch, I think I'm in love," yet he continued to have hiccups. The fact he'll be using most of it on his reluctant brother has nothing to do with it, I bet. Deidara felt justified when he saw Itachi getting tag-teamed by his own brother and the best medic in the elemental countries after being severely beaten in the balls. Deidara was still upset with Itachi for making him join the Akatsuki. Kisame was thrilled that Itachi had, for once, broken his Uchiha mask, and because of 2 children. Before Tsunade cleared him, Itachi had to bear her gentle mercies for a whole month. Hinata never imagined that she would discover one of Konoha's less agreeable secrets 4.5 months after the Genin exams. That Nozomi failed the first Genin exam because the teachers were so intent on bringing down the village weapon that they took down the entire class with her, or that the Hokage and his 3 advisors had ordered Itachi to kill his family and turn into a spy. Tsunade had publicly expressed her dissatisfaction at Hinata's lackluster abilities, and they were about at the top of the class in terms of practice, with Ino coming in second. Sakura would have won in terms of academics. Nozomi, who had been at the bottom because she was frequently expelled from class for trivial reasons, discovered that studying on the island was far more fruitful because, at least there, she received training free from discrimination. So, indeed, Tsunade invested a good 2 months in improving Hinata's abilities and overcoming her shyness. They were battlefield doctors, and a timid and quiet personality just wouldn't cut it. Her soft disposition was okay as long as she used it appropriately, but being uncertain of her abilities in the heat of combat would result in her death. Furthermore, Tsunade would be quite pleased to watch Hayashi's expression when his timid, weak daughter and heir shattered his nose. But after he received the all-clear to begin training, the gloves were removed. Itachi trained his brother to improve his Sharingan completely in a short period of time by teaching him small techniques. Nozomi also received same training, although it was more about teaching her how to use her speed in combat. Eggman had often attempted to disprove the fact that Sonic was more of a speed freak in battle, running circles until the opponent left an opening, even though he may have taught her how to run large distances and use her wind element to enhance her innate fighting abilities. Nozomi had no genuine experience using her taijutsu and that speed at the same time, but Itachi was faster. "I'm bored," Kisame declared. Although this trip was fantastic, he was a ninja, and eventually even training would get tedious as hell. Nozomi told Tsunade to pay up, and the Sannin complained before giving the smiling redhead 5,000. Kisame, who always enjoyed a good joke, sat up, waiting to see what the redhead would do. "So what do you have in mind, Red?" "A certain little troll, who shall remain nameless, short-changed me for a delivery. He then thought he could bribe me to forget that he's a cheapskate of a civilian. I heard rumors the idiot's trying to take over Wave, and he has one of your colleagues keeping the Hunter Nin busy with an accomplice. I plan to bankrupt the little shit, maybe make an outpost and train up some civilians to expand the business," evilly said Nozomi. "Spiteful, I like it, what's in it for me?" "Depends how badly do you want to upstage Konoha and possible make Zabuza shit himself." Deidara enthusiastically said, "Hell, count me in, He was always willing to piss off Konoha. "And what about the Uchihas?" "Konoha is too close to where we're going, and Itachi is starting Sasuke on the basics of Kenjutsu, so you can have fun traumatizing him later, and the tree huggers still have no idea that the orange flash is actually their missing weapon. Let's go screw with their heads a bit and lay down confusing leads that go nowhere and possibly piss off the other countries. Count me in, Me too, it'll be fun to annoy Zabuza again, and if nothing else we could help you rope him into being your courier at the outpost, laughed Kisame. The Iron Country leader made Nozomi a full citizen after she presented the official document from the Hokage stating that Naruto Uzumaki had been banned from the Konoha Shinobi Corps. He then legally changed her name and made it public for any shinobi who wished to find out where Naruto Uzumaki lived. Nozomi didn't live in Iron Country because of the prices or the fact that they didn't have the same instinctive hatred of her. Rather, she did so because they didn't cared about shinobi or jinchuriki. As long as she wasn't formally a member of any nation's shinobi army, Konoha couldn't legally come and claim her. It wasn't his concern if the Konoha shinobi hadn't been able to stop her from leaving her village ties. It was too little, too late for the Hokage and the entire council to straighten up their behavior, a reality she would gladly thrust in their faces. When Itachi learned where they were reverse summoning, he shouted, "Bring back Pocky!" Sasuke exclaimed, "And tomatoes." The friends' shared garden wouldn't be in season for a month, and it was one of their few non-destructive pastimes. Nozomi laughed. Sasuke was dependent on tomatoes. Before they packed up a few items to deter future skinflint people from attempting to defraud the orange flash of her cash, she gave them a two-finger salute. They had to reassess their priorities after discovering, because of the number of deaths in his tribe, Deidara planned to assassinate Kapinin Kakashi, who was present with 3 wet-nosed genin. Nozomi had a more sinister, superior concept. Her plan was to steal his porn, humiliate him to get it back, and have it recorded on film as a form of blackmail. And it was something the crazy bomber could support. It was more pleasurable to humiliate an adversary and obtain good blackmail than it was to kill them. Furthermore, killing Kakashi afterward would be entertaining, if nothing else. No killing the genin, we want them to actually be fun when whatever plan that idiot with the white mask has planned comes into play, Nozomi replied. There's a reason I always liked Yugaki. What about torture? Traumatize them if you must, but they must be more or less intact, otherwise Pain will never stop bitching about it when he finds out, so we might as well leave the cloaks behind. The Akatsuki's secret, true, leader was unaware that one of the people he intended to hunt down and murder had the entire group in her back pocket. This was ironic, as they either liked her too much or respected her as a fellow warrior and tactician. She was much more familiar with the group of outcasts than the leader was, and she got along well with nearly all of them. Therefore, it was questionable if they would pursue her. Just 10 minutes were needed to find Zabuza, and 15 minutes were needed for Nozomi to persuade him to turn up the area to Gata's base. His disciple, Haku, had been on edge until he or she heard Zabuza exchange thoughts about how slowly the midget would be slain. Zabuza was generally reasonable, especially after learning that Nozomi came from Iron Country rather than any of the hidden settlements. Additionally, he was all for playing practical jokes on Kakashi and his snotty brats. They were fortunate to have gotten away from him the first time. So let's see if I got this straight, you want me to act as a courier? Or as a frontman for the shop? Let's face it, because you're a former Kirinin, Iron won't have you, but it will allow you to make connections for the rebels in Mist to use in order to get much needed supplies and aid. Ignore Konoha though, they still have to clean up after the mess their Jinchuruki left behind. And Kami knows they'll try to lord it over you like they did Suna. Zabuza grimaced. I don't get it, why would you care about Konoha anyway? I'm the one who left, said Nozomi, and then she laughed, and I happen to have absconded with the heirs of their two most prestigious clans. All I ask in return is that you give me a week's notice if you're planning to break from my employ, and that you don't betray me or exceed the boundaries of good taste like Orochimaru has. When Orochimaru began leaping bodies in his quest to learn everything, he had gone beyond the point at which even shinobi had to declare that things had gotten too far. He was a cancer, and she would not miss him at all. At least Kabuto had consented to carry on Orochimaru's studies after he had exhausted Nozomi's patience, albeit with a few modifications. Orochimaru, crazy serpent or not, was a genius. You know Orochimaru? I'm a courier, so long as I'm paid, I don't give a damn what my client has done unless they're stupid enough to shortchange me like Gata did, and then I take my time to call in a few favors before I demonstrate what a phenomenally bad idea that is. Overkill, such as bringing in a few S-ranked nukenin to deal with a civilian, was not used. Zabuza's smile was menacing. I like you, kid. Can I watch while you explain to the bastard how badly he screwed up? Can you walk, or do we have to rig up a TV and video camera for you to watch from afar? He questioned. I don't have to fight, do I? Anyone stupid enough to try and stop us will meet Deidara, since I'm not letting him kill or maim the Konoha idiots, and anyone dumb enough to piss me off gets to meet Kisame. Then I can walk. Seldom. The bizarre lack of activity in the town was the first clue that something abnormal was going on, followed by the scent. Eventually, Wave residents warily ventured outside to discover the peculiar cause of the silent day. To their astonishment, they discovered Gatu and a significant number of his most brutal goons dead and hung, just like Kaiza had been. Gatu's death was the most graphic, and several of the citizens even lost their lunch. He held out a message while wearing a bloody orange scarf over his neck that was embroidered with the iconic Uzumaki swirl. I always get my due, cross the orange flash at your own peril. Tizuna, a courageous bridge builder, approached the sign and discovered a note. As the Konoha nin they had hired to save them stood there waiting, a courageous villager questioned, well, what does it say? According to this, Gata hired the orange flash for a courier job and shortchanged her, so since she was in the area she found Zabuza and his apprentice and they gave her the location of the bastard. She wanted to send a message to the other skin flint merchants that she will not abide being cheated out of her rightful due for a delivery. Tsunami inquired, what did they say the orange flash's name was again? Kakashi said, Nozomi Kamikaze, the fastest and most dependable courier in the elemental nations, out of iron, incredulously. You do realize that since Gata was killed by a third party, we no longer need you here, right? There's still the fact that you hired us to deliver you to Wave, Kakashi acknowledged uneasily. And you did, I didn't force you to stick around. Even though Tizuna played against the Leaf Nin's emotions, he hadn't made them assist. At least the person who killed Gatu and his men had been generous enough to leave enough money to cover the misranked assignment, even though Kakashi grudgingly agreed to depart. However, it was what transpired after they crossed the lake that would cause Kakashi to become quite alarmed about the whole situation. He had a bingo book and, as a former ANBU captain, he habitually carried it with him. Thus, he quickly identified the blonde-haired missing nin. Deidara, of IWA. Since he was still somewhat weak from his battle with Zabuza, he tensed up. To be honest, he hadn't anticipated an S-rank nukenin to be waiting for them, he simply knew it would be a massacre. His small genin crew, who was fortunately made up entirely of now former root members, tensed as well upon hearing the term IWA and witnessing his response. Imagine their shock, then, when they heard the sinister laugh of the nuke nin. Oh, I'm not here to fight, Then why are you here, so close to Konoha? Deidara's expression was practically malevolent. Distraction, for what? For me, a female voice cackled. Kakashi was horrified to discover that his priceless porn was gone from his pocket 3 seconds later. He turned to see a red head wearing goggles that were nearly identical to Naruto's. Obito had originally had them, but he had them fixed, and an orange scarf that matched the one that held the sign up around Gata's neck, all the way down to the Uzumaki swirl on the ends. For Kakashi, what followed was absolute torture, especially since they shamelessly took pictures of him without his disguise in order to get his book. No one threatened his beautiful Aika and got away with it. He would strangle that brat bare-handed if he ever saw her again. Kakuzu was the first to obtain copies of Kakashi's face without the mask. Although there had been much discussion about his appearance without it, no one had ever managed to convince him to take it off because he was simply that good. Given the photographic proof and the possibility of him ranting passionately about someone stealing his porn right in front of him, yes, he virtually loved Nozomi, especially during that time of the month when she wasn't just unpleasant but also evil and vengeful. As malevolent as an Uzumaki woman in the main line, 50 for the whole set. Deal, don't mention I sold you the first set, I plan on selling copies of these babies to IWA, Kumo, and some of the lesser villages. Not Suna. Although Nozomi wasn't controlled by money like Kakuzu was, she did learn a few things from him. They're broke after the current Kazekage pissed off their daimyo. I want real cash, not chump change, she said bluntly. Money meant power, power meant freedom, and freedom meant not having to listen to a bunch of stuffy assholes like the ones that inhabited the Konoha Council. Kakuzu bowed his head and agreed with her in silence, saying that Suna had declined since their daimyo had stopped providing him with most of his funds and began outsourcing missions to Konoha because he was upset over the Kazekage's treatment of his youngest son, their Jinchuriki. As a result, there were fewer missions and less money in their treasury, which meant that supplies of weaponry, medications, and other necessities also suffered. Nozomi had a startling thought. I know that look, you have a money-making scheme in mind, don't you? When Kiri settled down, they would open another Uzumaki delivery office. She would have called it the Orange Flash, but Uzumaki delivery had a better ring, and it brought some of her clan together. Her current shop in Iron was already making a lot of money, and the branch office in Wave was doing okay either, with Haku handling deliveries. As survivors of Uzushigakure emerged from the shadows, people began to recognize her clan emblem. A shop in Suna, Kakuzu reminded her, Suna's almost dirt poor. Yes, but I'd bet the Kazekage would jump at the chance to make some extra cash, even if it meant leaving his youngest son alone. The Uzumaki delivery is becoming really well known, so much so that it's starting to become the premier courier service. So what happens when I start to expand in other countries? Including hidden villages? She replied with sparkling eyes. Her appeal was straightforward. Fast service, impartial couriers, and a firm promise that they would reimburse you in full if you didn't receive your delivery were the first two promises that drew clients. It was also a plus because the leading courier was notorious for refusing large bribes. She may have sold some to Sasori, but he didn't pay as much and most of the contacts he already had anyway, and Kakuzu was quick to accept the man's informants for a nice fee from the girl. Ironically, her public claim that Gatu of Gata's shipping died because he tried to defraud her of her right made her even more popular with merchants, who could appreciate dealing with cheaters in a swift, decisive manner. According to Gata's accounts, she left Wave more than enough money to rebuild and pay off Konoha. She thought it was funny that they had named the bridge after her, the Great Uzumaki Bridge, enough for Zabuza and Haku to begin accepting customers, with Zabuza managing the store and Haku making short-distance deliveries, and the remainder she divided among herself, Deidara, and Kisame, who were happy that they wouldn't have to share any of it with Kakuzu, who claimed a portion of their missions. Thus, if it meant more business, Suna would very well sign on with a new courier service. To the chagrin of his co-workers, Nozomi sold the photos to 3 other individuals, each of whom paid high dollar, albeit not as much as Kakuzu did for the original set, for their own copies. Kakashi would be appalled to discover that his bingo book photograph had been altered to feature his true face. With the understanding that a portion of the delivery fee would go to the shinobi who created them, she arrived in Suna with a regular delivery and expanded the concept of an outpost in the village. This meant that a portion of the proceeds would return to the treasury. The Ichibi Jinchuriki, the Kazekage's son, was trained not to sleep, so he had to take responsibility of the nocturnal deliveries because he couldn't agree quickly enough. The Uzumaki Delivery Company's Suna location was operational within a week. The amount of money in the shinobi treasury increased over the course of a month, though not significantly, and merchants began informing their acquaintances about the new outpost. The Kazekage was obviously happy about this development, even though it meant giving up his attempt to murder his own son. Imagine his astonishment when a man wearing an odd hitayate entered the store carrying what looked to be a manuscript while Sasuke was in charge of the store and Nozomi was out for a brief run. Sasuke pointed his short sword at the placard right away before he spoke. Although we do not discriminate against official or nuke businesses, we do charge more for deliveries within recognized shinobi area, such as secret villages, so please be aware of this, shinobi consumers. Additionally, we only guarantee deliveries that reach the couriers. If the delivery calls for waiting at a predetermined location, we are not liable if the package is really intercepted by the legal owners. Thank you, and enjoy your day. Raising an eyebrow, Sasuke seemed to be saying inaudibly, "You get it." The man gave a nod. "What may I help you with today?" "We offer a flat rate for all deliveries, but hidden villages cost extra because of their security. We don't do retrieval, bodyguarding, or delivery of live items. We make a full money-back guarantee in the event that the item in question is not delivered, and we will tell you upfront whether or not we can handle the delivery. Also, if you try to start something, we can and will call the samurai here. This company upholds a strict neutrality clause." He examined Sasuke strangely and asked, "Are you an unclaimed Uchiha?" "Nothing as dangerous as any of that, I just need to get this manuscript to my publisher," the man responded. Because the shinobi had just asked him if he was a bastard Uchiha, Sasuke twitched and mentally increased the price tag. "I know who both my parents were, and they were married for years when they had me and my brother," replied Sasuke with annoyance. "Sorry, it's just I heard that the last Uchiha went missing a few months back with his girlfriend Ebka. She didn't make the cut for Genin. Before you go crowing to Konoha you found the Uchiha heir. Read this," Sasuke said flatly, observing the triumphant expression in his eyes. "More like the academy was full of complete idiots and dragged the collective survival rate for the entire class down just because of the fox," he said. He studied the page, and his eyes widened as he descended farther before he sputtered. "You rescinded all ties to Konoha. According to this document, which was signed and sealed by Lord Mifune and 3 of the serving Kages, I am no longer considered a shinobi, and thus cannot serve in any standing shinobi army as part of their forces. Any attempts to return me to Konoha to serve in their shinobi forces will be an act of war against Iron, and might very well spark the next great shinobi war," Sasuke said a bit too cruelly. A voice behind the white-haired guy added, "Coincidentally that applies to me as well," after Nozomi had completed her speech. "Why? Why give up the chance to be called shinobi?" Nozomi asked, arching an eyebrow toward. "You're throwing away generations of your heritage," he said, astonished by the last Uchiha's decision to sever relations so publicly. Sasuke boastfully remarked, "Who said anything about throwing away my heritage? Shinobi don't have a monopoly on jutsu, chakra, or their techniques. No one said you have to be a shinobi in order to learn them, it's just that only shinobi bother to learn, and most hidden villages are quick to snap anyone who is decent into their army," laughed Nozomi. Additionally, it was simpler for them to simply be Iron members because they had made it apparent that they were uninterested in the shinobi's inter-village politics. This meant that during times of conflict, they could move practically any place they wanted without being forced into whatever village was superior. That, along with the fact that they weren't truly from any village, gave shinobi headaches as they tried to understand someone who had shinobi training and could fight. Seeing their brains struggle to understand such a basic, and seemingly new, concept was entertaining. "So what did you need?" After shaking himself from his surprise, the man displayed his manuscript. Nozomi and Sasuke's faces instantly displayed contempt. "If I had known you were Jiraiya of the Sannin, would have thrown you out," Sasuke stated angrily. Jiraiya blinked because that was who he was. "You know of me? Tsunade-bachan said you were the writer of that fourth-rate porn I stole. She about busted a gut laughing when I told her I sold the Hokage's complete collection to a known S-ranked missing nin for him to blackmail the old man," laughed Nozomi. Before he finally looked at her carefully for whatever reason, Jiraiya blinked and processed the information in his mind. "Naruto? Uzumaki Naruto?" Before he could say another word, she slapped him with a seal. "Before you go and ruin my fun to the Hokage, that seal Gramps shared with me will keep your mouth shut or else." Jiraiya paled as he examined the little of the sealing script he could make out. He was certain that it was Uzumaki's work, and he could tell that if he said something inappropriate, something would blow up. "Now, you said something about delivering your half-assed porn," replied Nozomi. Jiraiya appeared sullen. "My book is not half-assed. The only things you got grammatically correct were the naughty bits and the ninja terminology," she said bluntly. Sasuke rolled his eyes and remarked, "Not really the best way to pass intelligence, not to mention the code you left in that took us 5 minutes to break." Jiraiya complained, "Hard to find any decent proofwriters that don't pass out from blood loss." Nozomi grinned and said, "She said, 'Give me 15 minutes, and disappeared into the back room with the manuscript. In 15 minutes, she had corrected all the mistakes and disregarded the secret messages when she returned, and Jiraiya stared at it. Nozomi remarked, "Now, concerning my delivery cost, Kushina would be extremely proud of Jiraiya, who left behind a poorer but wiser man. His goddaughter was equally cunning and malevolent as her mother." When Jiraiya went to see his former instructor to inquire for any news regarding his goddaughter, he was not idle. However, he suddenly understood why no one had ever located the girl. She had changed her name, appearance, and hair. The sole similarity between Naruto and Nozomi Kamikaze was their shared love of orange and the Uzumaki swirl. And now he had an Uzumaki seal on him thanks to the cheeky brat. Jiraiya, the greatest seal master and spy master of Konoha. Though he didn't have to enjoy it, he was reluctantly impressed by the female. It did imply that he had to examine Naruto's actual life in depth. She had to have had a very excellent cause for leaving her hometown and relocating to Iron. Unbeknownst to the Toad Sage, Kabuto amusedly observed his brief foray into Naruto's everyday life before informing her of it. As foolish as the leaf was, it wasn't foolish enough to overlook the obvious in front of them. The Sannin were correct to trust an elderly politician like Sarutobi to look after a child after it was foolish enough to tell the entire fucking village what had happened to the demon without really informing them. Similar to the Kyuubi's probable container, Sasuke questioned, "So what are we doing again?" We're doing a full test on what to focus on, shinobi training wise, this way you know what areas of shinobi training you should work on, and what to ignore, stuff like elemental affinity, taijutsu and possible genjutsu. Since you're finally up to high genin standards, Shadow Sensei said he's going to bring you up to Chunin. Itachi will focus on the Sharingan, and you already have medic training with Tsunade. And what will you be doing? Studying, because I'm an Uzumaki and a speed freak. Gigi said I should abuse the hell out of the Shadow clone to read as many books as I possible could after dinner, then he'll knock me out and let my brain sort out the information, and since you basically stole everything from the Uchiha library, and I've read everything Shadow already has twice, your mind naturally processes faster than normal, and the Shadow clone have a memory transfer aspect, and thanks to the fact you have a bad habit of focusing on 100 things at once already, abusing the Shadow clones would make it easier to process the written information rather than hinder it, Sasuke pondered. Pretty much what Gigi said. Sonic has the same bad habit, but he's classified as a summon, so he doesn't need to learn this stuff. I'm a self-trained shinobi, which is what we're classified as since we abdicated our ties to our original village. That's one thing I never got, we're clearly shinobi, yet we're not classed as Nuke Nin, even if we originally trained in a shinobi village. In order to be classed as a missing Nin, you would have to be registered as part of a shinobi army, Itachi stated. Huh. It's like this, in order to be a standard shinobi, you have to be initiated into a shinobi army of a village or group. In short, they have to give you a rank, then the other villages are alerted on a specific month of new additions, no pictures or stats, just a basic description and shinobi ID. Which means they'll have your chakra on file just in case they need to identify your body. Now since we left before our chakra could be filed with the others, by shinobi law dictated by the first Hokage who set the standards, we are classed as rogue or mercenary shinobi, meaning we answer to no village and thus have to handle our own expenses. Thanks to our courier business, this is less of an issue than it would normally be. With laughter, Itachi remarked, not to mention the money you keep blackmailing Kakuzu out of. Despite having some amusement in her eyes, Nozomi didn't appear ashamed. That's bonus. Now with any rogue shinobi, the main issues would be money, alliance, medical supplies, food, water, and of course, lodging. Because I've been working as a courier before we finished our genin exam, we have most of that covered. The main issue, for you at least, is training. Since I specialize mostly in maintaining our cash flow and alliance base, training takes place after deliveries are made, like any other shinobi on a regular out-of-village mission rotation. What about Hinata though? She is classified as a apprentice-type shinobi, meaning a high-ranking shinobi has taken her directly under their supervision, which means she's a normal shinobi by current standards. I mostly kidnapped her because she's my best friend and it was killing me to watch her spirit slowly die because of her dad and the elders. I kidnapped you because Konoha certainly wasn't doing you any favors by kissing your ass all the time and then comparing you to people long dead at this point, stated Nozomi, for which I am eternally grateful. Something tells me those idiots wouldn't understand me at all, and those fangirls were driving me insane. The wise Itachi said, fangirls are the curse of all male Uchiha, just like fanboys were the curse of the female, before he saw his brother's eyes sparkle. This coming from the big bad Anbu who was flat out horrified when I told him some of his fan club had been paying me and Shursui to get into your room to plant cameras, laughed Sasuke. Itachi trembled. One of the reasons he had seized the opportunity to embark on an undercover operation was discovering that his shower was equipped with cameras and observation seals. Unfortunately, he was unaware that this would result in the near extinction of his clan. Even if he still chuckled uncontrollably at the idea of the gigantic, evil Uchiha being afraid of the least dangerous creature in the world, Kisame was at least a great fangirl repellent. Since you're finally ready to undergo the specialized training, that means you're almost ready for your position as the store face of the Uzumaki Delivery Company in Iron. Have I ever said how much I love working as a delivery company more than I might have enjoyed being a shinobi? Replied Sasuke with a grin. Believe me, if it were possible I'd join it in a heartbeat, Itachi remarked. Same here, Kisame and Deidara added. With half the foolishness and paperwork, Nozomi's company had all the fun of being a shinobi. Well, that just means I can put you three to work doing something that not even your boss would fault me for and annoy the hidden villages even more, since it would make me the boss of a large shinobi army in all but name. You want us to go recruiting? Nozomi grinned and nodded, trusting the genius to figure it out without being to be told. Deidara remarked, what do we look for? It seemed more intriguing than anything else. First we'll need a general list of the current missing nin, then we'll filter out those who wouldn't suit the courier ninja standard I've set. After that we'll find and hopefully start recruiting. In the meantime I have to go talk to a fox while my clones try to make my brain explode from reading too much, Nozomi said. Itachi suspected she meant the Kyuubi, but Deidara, Kisame, and Sasuke thought she meant Tails. He was surprisingly easy to bribe for a huge fox with a ton of tails. She once made a joke about him being Tails' older brother, which really irritated him. Kyuubi, whose real name was Rakuto Kurama, was lying down in the lovely mock island she had created in place of the sewers they had previously used. Although he was restricted to a specific area of the island, it was far better than what he had to endure previously. At least she gave him more freedom to move around than her mother or her great-great-aunt did. After purposefully failing the genin exam, Kurama immediately distanced herself from that damn village while stealing one of their most powerful weapons. Of course, Konoha was hiding the fact that the forbidden scroll had been taken, or they hadn't bothered to confirm that a switch had been made in the first place. This is why Kurama liked his current container the most. Nozomi was superior to the latter. By now, there would have undoubtedly been some commotion over discovering the abomination if they had noticed. Even though Orochimaru was unaware that Nozomi possessed the real one, she knew he was still planning to free the false. She always admired the crazy woman, so it's a shame she couldn't take Anko Mitarashi from the village. Brat, are you back again? Nozomi replied, come on Kurama, you know you love me if only because I told Konoha to go screw itself, as he prodded one of his enormous ears that resembled a rabbit. I've got time to kill since the clones are reading everything they can get their hands on, be prepared for an influx and a massive headache. Kurama snorted. So, shogi or shiratori? Nozomi reminded him that Kurama was surprisingly skilled at teaching logic games. You said you'd teach me how to play Go, he remarked. Not a game of poker. I win too much at that. When Kurama blinked, a Go board materialized. It was not too large for Nozomi to pick up and position the pieces, nor too little for Kurama to use his claws to position them as he pleased. As the two of them played, the information gradually started to seep in. As the information was sorted into the proper locations, nearby trees started to bloom. Nothing ever withered permanently, the knowledge that was utilized the most would remain ripe, while the least used would remain blooms. Fruits would grow and then fall to the ground to be absorbed as needed. So when do you think you'd be up for a trial run of the chain bijou? Replied Nozomi. The chain bijou, as she liked to call it, was a combination technique involving Kurama's appearance and the Uzumaki chakra chains. Naturally, this meant that they couldn't practice Kurama's chakra outside of Dream Island because Konoha would come down in large numbers attempting to reclaim her, and given everything she had done to escape them, that was not an option. In addition, it was a last resort since if she used it, she might as well be saying, "I'm your missing weapon," or they might assume Kurama was missing because she was dead. In any case, they couldn't use it outside of the island. "We can beat Shikaku up if we can figure that out quickly. I know Gaara's bad habit has been annoying you." Nozomi's cheerful demeanor changed to a grumpy frown. Kurama so casually referred to Gaara's bad habit as having slain the guards who were attempting to check his identification. Although he had not yet killed a client, she was concerned that it might happen soon. She wasn't concerned, just annoyed. The Suna branch was on the verge of going bankrupt as a result of killing individuals for confirming that you were merely there to deliver something. As an apology from the Kazekage, she received a very large payment in wind jutsu that she would not have otherwise been able to obtain, and the only reason she hadn't bothered to close it was because it was literally the only reason Suna's shinobi army wasn't in decline anymore. For selling part of the jutsu from Konoha's forbidden scroll, she continued to receive payment from the Tsuchikage. The transaction was a jutsu for a jutsu. In addition, they were able to gently irritate Konoha, which was fantastic for Kurama and Nozomi. She hated the townspeople more than she hated the village shinobi. "A bunch of fucking fools, so beat down on your little brother and possible mental scarring." Kurama had a toothy smile. "Let's rehearse so we can give Shikaku nightmares and a painful ass from the ass kicking we're going to give that moron. I knew you were my favorite jailer." Fortunately, Eggman was aware that seals could hold Bija chakra. With the knowledge she had, she understood that Kisame and Deidara would eventually pursue the Bijou, therefore it wouldn't be beneficial for them to know about Kurama just yet. This is why she was taking a different approach rather than training her ass in the hopes of defeating them. Switching sides and using blackmail. Itachi, Kakuzu, Conan, and possibly Pain were already on her side. Kisame was a toss-up, but she had a good hold on him because she didn't lie to him and didn't want to hide her plans. Ironically, he detested traitors and lies. Deidara was like a little sister to him, but he wasn't sure if he trusted her enough to stand with her against whoever was guiding the Akatsuki out of the shadows. Zetsu, to put it plainly, could not give a damn, although she hardly ever saw him because he was typically paired with the rookie named Toby. Nozomi felt that he would prefer to be with his parents, but Sasori could not care less as long as he was left alone with his puppets. The old geezer was a cheapskate who would kill for the sake of saving money, so Kakuzu's partner would have a revolving door until they found someone who wouldn't die. At the moment, they were thinking about a missing nin from the village hidden in the hot springs who was moving away from a shinobi village and toward a civilian one. Ironically, it was simpler to hide a town than to demilitarize one until there were no more shinobi in use. Kakuzu was still pouting since she had arrived in the town first and wasn't a missing nin, so she had paid the elders a respectable amount to purchase the majority of the in-house jutsu, which they were using to settle the daimyo. Mostly because she had paid for it with some of her blackmail materials.